Hi everyone, it's Chris Lesarenko from Revolutions Per Movie. Today is our 1-year anniversary show, and I just want to thank everyone in advance for listening to the show, reviewing it, supporting the Patreon, and just generally being excited about what I'm doing here with the show. It means a lot, and your feedback and support have really kept me going. And I'm so excited about year 2. We have amazing guests and amazing projects in the works, and I can't wait to share more of that with you as we move into year 2 of Revolutions Per Movie. But again, thank you so much. I know there's a lot of other entertainment out there, and I appreciate you listening and supporting the show. Thank you so much. Enjoy the show. My guest this week is Owen Kline. Owen is an American director, screenwriter, and actor based in New York City. His acting credits include Noah Baumbach's The Squid and the Whale, the Safdies' John's Gone, and the Michael M. Belendeck comedies Hellaware and Job's World. Kline's directorial debut, Funny Pages, premiered in the Director's Fortnight at the Cannes Film Festival and was voted as one of the top 10 independent films of 2022 by the National Board of Review. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Revolutions Per Movie, Owen Kline. Hi, Owen.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is the 1-year anniversary of the show. And
Mazel tov.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And I'm excited that you picked Tommy, a film that people have been asking, when is someone gonna pick Tommy?
Has that been a lingering question? It was the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah, I think so, because, it's a rock film, and it's a rock opera, and it's Ken Russell, and it's The Who. And I can't wait to get into the weeds with you. But I wanted to talk to you about your film, Funny Pages. I really gravitated towards it and felt a connection to it because even though you don't say what era it takes place in, it feels like it's about an era in the late 80s and early 90s where the intersection of underground comics, independent music, and independent filmmaking were all triangulating in a way that probably hadn't happened since the late 60s, with all the art and culture going on. And it's an era that is kind of sadly passing, I feel like, in terms of, you picking someone like Johnny Ryan to represent the artist that the kid is drawing is like a really specific choice, because Johnny Ryan, he pushes buttons still. He's part of an era that's like, I am showing you what's in my head.
He was also sort of the fair-haired boy of like he was what the Fantagraphics culture wrought in a way, and people kind of realized, okay, this is the guy we're passing the baton to, So Bag and Klaus and everybody sort of bowed down to him. Crumb was critical of him and was less enthusiastic. He even uses in the omnibus of Angry Youth comics, like Crumb's nasty quote about him, like he's used it to sell books, which is really funny.
It is. Well, what made you decide to make a movie about, a kid who's wanting to make independent art through comics?
Well, I guess you and I were discussing, like, we're kind of ideological dinosaurs. It's much more fashionable to sell out. Maybe it's always been, but I feel like at least, I didn't realize how much I live under a rock culturally in that regard. So I did not realize just how kind of backwards this kid's ethos would look in 2022, which was when the movie came out. But it's not directly set in any year. I didn't want to, people did ask me, why doesn't this kid wouldn't he be putting his drawings up on social media or et cetera, but that didn't excite me, and I wanted it to sort of exist in more of a comic book world where it's not explicitly 1 year or anything. But I grew up, making comics on a Xerox machine and complaining about, oh, so and so sold out and they did a thing for DC Comics or whatever it would be. Like it just, and that's the thing. It's like the culture of the 80s and 90s is those are the people that I looked up to that were around New York. And so their way of looking at things and seeing things is just what I adopted, but I didn't realize I was adopting just an older ethos. And again, it's that triangulation of, yeah, music, independent music culture, independent film culture, independent comics culture, all in some way share in an ethos that has nothing to do with popular art today and its processes. So, yeah.
The concept of selling out has come up so much in this podcast. We did the talk about Jawbreaker and people being upset that they opened for Nirvana and they're like sellouts. So Nirvana were already sellouts. I remember Dan Klaus doing the OK Cola thing and that being in the conversation of like, oh, that's weird.
Coca-Cola company money. Yeah.
But at the time there was really, it's easy to forget that the ceiling was low in terms of what success you could get as an independent artist. It was not full-time. You're having to supplement. It was like people were not making a living on it yet because that dream didn't exist.
There was also just an allure to elusivity and the enigma and stuff. And that's sort of what I was trying to do with the movie in terms of just the protagonist being drawn to a guy that no one around him understood. He just sort of declares this guy sort of an enigma, maybe is confusing him for an unrecognized genius to some degree. But yeah, in some way it is an expression of just wanting to be a part of a culture that doesn't exist anymore. And I feel like it's particularly allowed to express those bygone cultures now, but it certainly was even when I was a teenager. I wasn't looking at the new comics. I was looking at the old comics. You know what I mean? I was going through the back issue bins of all the comic stores in New York and all of the alternatives to obviously the sort of 60s, 70s comics and older, the older, and then stuff older was being priced up, but you could still buy Weirdo magazine for cover price. I picked up all the Hate comics and Neat Stuffs for cover price. 8-Ball, Julie Duche's Dirty Plot. Now those are collectibles, but at the time they were. Now they're putting out trade paperbacks of that stuff, and they were putting trade paperbacks out of and collecting certain things back then as well. But there wasn't. Now it's been another 20 years.
Well, the film is also about, I feel like you really channel that first naive instinct of being like, I'm moving out, I'm moving in with strangers. This is the greatest thing ever. But not knowing like the consequences of like a weird neighborhood or weird roommates and just the misalignment that comes from youth and just the excitement of just trying to escape your past.
Yeah, and just being, he's not moving to Brooklyn. He's moving to Trenton, New Jersey. And it's like, I'm going to escape. Right. I'm going to create my own culture in some way as a part of that. And that idea is completely antiquated. Probably anyone listening to this, it's like, can connect to this movie, but not everybody. The decisions that this kid makes, all naive as they are relatable. I imagine would be relatable to anyone that's in your orbit, perhaps.
Yeah, but I remember the weird windowless room, and there's that great scene in your film with the aquarium that's just clouded and it's just got a certain light to it, and there's certain parts of the house you're not allowed to go into. And I lived in a place that had a turret in it. Like, there was 9 of us living in it. There were 2 people I never met out of the 9 of us. They had their own entrance. They were a total mystery. I never got to see the turret of the house because that was their space.
Yeah.
And it just really captured that thing of being like, I don't know what's going on. Like, is this actually, are the people good here? I have no idea.
Yeah, the fish tank in particular, that was actually something that came from the DP, Sean Williams, who had grown up in Maryland. His dad was sort of a hillbilly and had a veteran friend with a fogged fish tank that didn't have any fish in it. In ours, it's ambiguous until it isn't, that there are fish inside of it. But it's the movie is not strictly autobiographical. It's not autobiographical at all. It's drawn with personal fabric.
I also feel like your casting in the film is through the vantage point of someone who loves underground comics. Your love of faces and interesting haircuts and just a style to it, where, like, I think if somebody might read a Dan Clowes comic, might think, oh, this is kind of absurd. Oh, those people really exist, like, who have a certain look and style, and it's just the way they are.
I was just sort of thinking about wild characters, but I wasn't thinking about just that how just quite how cartoonish it would all read. I knew that it would be the world that I wanted the kid to inhabit would be uh sort of just this very vacuum sealed world of odd people that he's just sort of shifted into the twilight zone. There aren't many
Yes.
normal quote unquote people in the movie, but and who wants to see normal? Every other movie has like boring, bland actors. I don't think anyone is strange. It's just personality. People just have strong
That's it.
personalities is all it is. Yeah.
And they're comfortable with it. They're not judging themselves, It's like that's just who they inhabit. But I remember that's what it's like. You enter an adult world and you sometimes just end up in a world that's like completely different than anything you've inhabited before, whether it's because you take a job or where you end up moving. You're not always going to end up in like the hipster house.
No, and sometimes you do kind of wind up in a strange circle. And you just, yeah, how did I get here exactly?
Yeah.
But it was just sort of natural for me. It was just the people that I could talk about movies and music and old comedy with were and animation, golden age animation and silent animation were, and old 78s and old music. You just end up with the people that share those interests and that you can talk about it. You sort of overlook anything peculiar about them, and become your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really it's very masterful. It
I
meant a
appreciate
lot.
that.
So,
Thank you.
especially as somebody who owned a video store, I was like, oh my God, I just miss stories like this.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
With Tommy, I have a question for you because I feel like Tommy is a chicken egg for certain people of a certain age. Some people saw the film first, and some people were like Who fans and knew the album first. Did you see the film first or the album? What came with it?
No, no, no. I came to the album afterwards. Of course, like the
Okay.
Who was kind of one of my first favorite bands at like 12 or 13. So I saw Tommy around that time for the first time, and it was so visually exciting. I didn't know what and the music was great. And, I don't really know what to make of it. I still don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a pretty tangled, like, what's the story really? You know what I mean?
It's so funny. I mean, yeah. I mean, even Townsend, who was writing it, he was changing things on the fly. Townsend inserted the pinball mythology into it because originally Tommy was just going to feel vibrations in the air and be able to feel music.
Now watching it it was my introduction to Ken Russell. This movie was also just my introduction
Right.
to Ken Russell. And I was like, now I'm a huge Ken Russell fan and a huge Who fan. And it's funny seeing it now and thinking about it. Especially since, like, what's interesting about Ken Russell to me is, yeah, he started in like the late 50s, early 60s. He was first making films. He wanted to be a ballerina. He dodged the war, I think, and, was able to be diagnosed as, insane in order to get out of the war. But I don't, or rather the Marines. But what's interesting about him is, have you seen those early composer films that he made? The BBC ones, because he started the BBC. They launched his film career.
Yeah, and he still did it. He did Mahler later on, and he was just obsessed with musical biopics.
I love Mahler, and that's to me an interesting return to those earlier composer films. I have that BFI flip side Blu-ray of those. But what's interesting about those and that time, the Angry Young Man movies were, and the sort of kitchen sink
Yes.
realism, that was the foundation. But he seemed like he was hearkening back to, obviously, right off the bat, he was trying to do something more expressive and more grandiose, and more European.
Totally.
And the only practitioners of anything more expressive at that time were like Richard Lester, you know what I mean, who was doing something more Godardian, which is what those composer movies are. I mean, the Debussy one is much more, it feels like more an early chopped up strange images juxtaposed with each other Godard movie than it is a strict biography. But but so all those guys, Richard Lester was the only guy doing like kind of French New Wave, but he's harkening back to probably the Powell and Pressburger movies of his youth, I imagine. You know what I mean? That those were big. Everything had turned to realism. The guy who teeters the line is Lindsay Anderson. Lindsay
Sure.
Anderson is totally between kitchen sink realism and something more wildly expressive. But it's interesting to see in those composer films him figuring out his voice, and there isn't a realism at all. I mean, he's doing, and they're composer films for the BBC, I mean, so he's sort of taking, and I love that that's also like a weird tradition in British, or it goes back to Hogarth or whatever. So sort of taking the grand tradition of some kind and turning it on its head and making it sort of a little less puffed up or something.
And it's a perfect meeting. I mean, Ken Russell and The Who.
The sacred and the profane,
And also, I love that this era where there's no bones about it. This is a midnight movie. This is like an experimental pop film. It's not like making any bones about it. Like, it's weird. It's sophisticated.
Yeah, but it's so. But the thing is, other midnight, other cult aspiring films are just sort of a mess, and every image in this movie seems like they've been rehearsing it for weeks.
No, you're right. It's very careful with the story.
He built a visual mastery around the music that was sort of, they had already perfected in some way, and we're just readapting it for all of these great performers. And I think what they learned from doing Who's Next, I mean, 69, the Who records the Tommy concept album, and then they went into trying to do this other concept album, rock opera, right off the back of it. I don't know. Did Tommy sell well? I don't know. The album? I don't even know. I mean, I see copies of it all the time, but that could mean one or two things.
What happened was Pete Townsend, right when this was happening, said, we were a singles band and our singles were starting to do poorly. I can see For Miles did poorly for them. And he was just like, well, where do we go from here? That's an incredible song. Like, I can't do
anything. The market had shifted.
Yeah, I can't do anything more with this. And, obviously, like a quick one, was like a precursor to a longer formed, rock opera. And people were starting to dabble in it with, the Pretty Things with SF Sorrow and Zappa. But the thing about this is that it is so framed like an opera.
Ken Russell calls it the only rock opera. And I think what he means when he says that, obviously he wasn't a rock fan, and that this album came to him and he said, okay, wasn't familiar with it. And then he started kind of going, okay, well, who's Captain Walker? How did he die?
Right.
And they started building this whole setup to the movie. But before I get into that, it is interesting. So they did Tommy. They recorded Tommy in 69. 1970 and 71, I think they're trying to do this, or 1970 at least, they're trying to do this sci-fi opera that Townsend backed it up with, called Lifehouse, and it falls apart. So they end up with Who's Next in 71, and that's when the ARP synth came into their records. That's the twinkling synth on Baba O'Reilly sound is suddenly all over that record. It's not on Tommy the album, but that sound, that Terry Riley inspired sound. That becomes the first 10 or 15 minutes that Ken Russell builds. It's where there's even a guitar that comes in.
There's not a guitar to be heard till near 7 minutes in the film. It's all synth based.
It really does have a genuinely operatic structure. And I would say there's a couple of great pieces of musical composition in this movie, just the songs of the movie, but it's actually about the repetitions and when they come back in. And that's, to me, the structure of just how, those when things come in and out and back into the mix.
And Russell does it as well. He bookends shots with the holiday camp at the beginning. Like when they enter in, you see the people bending over doing the extras. When they leave, same thing. Same with Tommy's camp later in the film. Same location, same entrance. But it is funny because I think Townshend, when he was doing Tommy, was also guessing the whole time. I mean, the whole last third where Tommy basically decides that he's going to be a religious icon and teach people, his ways. Townshend was like, that was just a thought. He was like, it was going to end with Tommy being free. And then he's like, well, what if? And it's such an interesting what if. And that, to me, that whole last third really strengthens the whole first part of the film because it just it just puts a different weight on everything.
Monroe, I guess. So this is what's kind of interesting. There are two aborted things, but there was a film that Ken Russell spoke about that he had a film called The Angels, which was about false religions. It was a screenplay he had written, and he just couldn't get financing for it, and it was kind of deemed uncommercial. And so he realizes he could fold that into Tommy. So, I mean, honestly, my least favorite part of Tommy is probably, no offense to Eric Clapton, I'm not a Clapton.
Oh, I'm right there with you.
I mean,
the Maryland section feels out of place. It's very Ken Russell, I get it, and you get to see the Who perform and Arthur Brown.
The Arthur Brown of it, yeah, that's cool. It was added in. That was added, I'm sure, added in order to support the ending of sort of making Tommy into a Christ-like pop, figure who struggled or whatever. Eyesight to the blind thing. Like it's also my least favorite thing on the concept. I'm just because it's like I just don't like the white boy blues thing. Pick a Beatles record, pick a Stones record, pick a Who record, and it's like the stuff that like the thing where I jump the needle is always the like blues inspired stuff.
The late 60s white blues thing.
Yeah, and it's funny. There's blues I like. I love Sonny Boy Williams. That recording is obviously great. Where James plays guitar on Eyesight, the Eyesight of the Blind, the original version. But I just don't want to hear British guys play blues. Same thing with ELO. It's just like I don't want to hear Roll Over Beethoven. I don't want to hear them do.
Right.
I want to see. If I want to listen to R&B, I'll go to the late 50s.
Right. You'll listen to Chuck Berry.
Late 50s, and yeah, exactly.
It's also interesting because Russell made the choice to have the actors sing their stuff. So Oliver Reed, sings. Ann-Margret sings. Jack Nicholson sings.
It doesn't sound. What is Jack Nicholson's singing voice? It's like something it doesn't sound like it. That's the one.
He's got a fake British accent. He's
is
doing the doctor
his voice?
Thing.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. He did it. He really did it.
It's so weird sounding. It doesn't sound.
No,
like
but he's putting on an air. He's being like, oh, I'm a British. It's just really weird, but it is him. He did record that.
He was so expensive at the time, apparently, to get, and they got him because he was going to the Cannes Film Festival for something.
Amazing.
The day before he went to the Cannes Film Festival, he just did one day on this movie, just because whatever. He was a Who fan, a Ken Russell fan.
But I feel like that those choices are interesting too, because it's Oliver Reed and Ann-Margret, I think, are incredible in this film.
Oh, and she's great. I mean, of course, she's obviously a great singer. I mean, in the Elvis movies, and well, does she sing in the Elvis movies? I've only ever seen. I mean, I've seen her sing in movies, but in Viva Las Vegas or something.
She did, and Bye Bye Birdie, and
Bye Bye Birdie.
I just watched her recently in Magic with Anthony Hopkins, and I was like, she's awesome.
Oh, she's great in that movie. I love that movie. I love Burgess Meredith in that.
Yeah,
with the Swifties Lazar glasses.
Totally.
And the other thing that I was when watching this Ken Russell interview was talking about Keith Moon a lot and how much the Uncle Ernie character meant to him. He's like, he really felt he was this guy. And was saying, obviously that Keith Moon was into sort of dark comedy, had a really bizarre sense of humor. He was friends with Vivian Stanchel, the Bonzo Dog Band.
That makes sense. And he was 29.
29 in the movie?
So young.
Yeah, that's insane. Well, how old was he
Yeah.
when he died?
Early 30s, wasn't
Yeah.
he? He's great in this movie as Uncle Ernie. I mean, John Entwistle was, put to work by Pete Townsend to do like the darker numbers with the cousin and the uncle characters because it was too traumatic for him to do. But I feel like both, I don't know what you think of Roger Daltrey's performance in it, but I think for a rock star god type figure, I think he does a pretty great job in this film.
Oh, absolutely. And that's another thing Ken Russell said in this interview. He was like, he had created this character and had lived with this for so long, and they had it so clear in their head. I didn't even need to direct him. It's a great performance.
Amazing.
Yeah. And this is just this is just sort of my hot take on The Who. The Who is one of those bands. I'm good friends with Greg Turkington. We have talked about this a lot. Like, people, they sort of say it's like, all right, The Who is John Entwistle, Keith Moon, Townshend, and you don't need, like, the singer could be anyone. The singer could, if it had been Mick Jagger, it would have been Mick Jagger. But like, I disagree, though. To me, what I love about The Who, he's the voice. He has such a range as a vocalist, and it's why, to me, they're still my favorite of all of the sort of British invasion bands. Is it's how they all work together, and you see it. You see the energy and you see how kind of spectacular they all are together. Just even from the very beginning when they were playing, those clubs. So those mod clubs as the High Numbers. You've seen that footage, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it's so funny. Townshend hated Daltrey back then. He hated his voice. He hated what he did. It wasn't till Tommy that he was like, oh my God, he's grown. Like he's inhabiting this character. Because Townshend was going to sing the see me, feel me parts. And then he heard Daltrey do it, and he's like, oh, he gets it. And ever since then he was like, I can trust him with anything. I can write whatever I want emotionally. He'll get it. And I think that part of Daltrey never getting the trust of Townshend, and then Tommy being the character that he grows into, I feel like even in this performance, he's still got something to prove to Townshend. It has this thing where he's like, I'm going to completely give myself over to this role. One of the things that's really funny about Roger Daltrey's performance is he can do a perfect cartwheel over and over again in any terrain he wants. He's very good at climbing things, and he's a good hang glider too.
That was my big question, is when he's on the cliff at the end, the wide shot of him, it must be a double.
Yeah.
It must be. But I could also see it being him. It seems like it's him when he gets up the cliff. I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, it's another bookend. The film starts with, his father and the sun going down, and it ends with it going up.
Yes. And you see him in the waterfall in which he was conceived.
And there's a documentary about the making of Tommy.
See, I'm a Who fan. I don't profess to be a historian. I haven't seen that documentary. What is it?
Oh, it's great. It's great. And that's where he talks about, like, in the documentary, he talks about we were going to give up because we couldn't do anything better than the singles we were doing, and we were starting to go down and be out of step. It talks about the playfulness of him being like, well, shoot, let's just make it about pinball. It was that quick, It was just an afterthought. The pinball theme was not added till quite late into it. And then once Pinball Wizard was written, it glued everything together. I wrote a concept album for fun in 2000 called Colonel Jeffrey Pumpernickel, where I wrote the story, and I had Stephen Malcolmus and Ann Magnuson and Granddaddy and Lou Barlow and Guided by Voices write songs based on my flimsy idea, right?
Yeah.
About a soldier who leads his men the wrong way in war because of allergies. And that's all I needed, right? I just needed a thin premise, and then I could go to Quasi and be like, Okay, this is about animals versus machines. All right, Granddaddy, this is about saying goodbye to your loved ones going off to war. And then you just read into it. And I think what's interesting about the film is it's a visual representation of the thing that you were reading into it. And it was so vague. And this film is not vague. It's like Ken Russell being like, bam, 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 bam. You know, when you're playing pinball and you're blind, the bumpers turn into the fighter planes, and then they turn into crosses, and things that couldn't happen when you listen to the record.
Well, that's what's great about it, is it's like, this is written by actual rock guys, and they wrote it, and it's conceived in a way where you listen to the album, and if I hadn't heard, I saw the movie before I heard the album, so it's like,
right.
But if you just had the album, you'd be left with you could interpret the album in a lot of different directions, I think. And I think what's interesting about it is oblique, and then it becomes Ken Russell's job to sort of justify and cement certain motifs and everything, and support this thing with images and tell a story and flesh out the story of it even clearer. Also, what's interesting is on the album, it's the Oliver Reed character who's killed.
Exactly.
In the film, of course, it's more traumatic, though, if it's his dad comes home from the war and the dad is killed.
Yeah, and I always wondered if that's because they got Oliver Reed and they're like, we can't kill him in 5 minutes. He's so good in it.
He's clearly the fucked up uncle, and he just doesn't care. Ann-Margret is haunted with this thing that happened, and there's a level of guilt, and he just doesn't care.
And I didn't know till recently that she was nominated for an Academy Award for this, and she won a Golden Globe for her role in Tommy.
Wow. How many times has Oliver Reed played Teddy Boys? This was the oldest Teddy Boy.
Yeah. And it works well because the grease in his hair matches the sweat. I mean, this is a sweaty film. Like Ann-Margret and Oliver Reed screaming at young Tommy, and then Uncle Ernie and Cousin Kevin. Everyone is just dripping with, like, they don't get rid of any of the oil on anyone's face in this film. Like, you know what I mean? It's like a choice. Like,
it's like my movie. We were just spraying people with glycerin in that basement, but everyone, yeah. But that's just a Ken Russell thing. It's just like, all right, we're going to put a wide angle lens on you, go so close to your face. We're going to be in this flattering low angle, and you're going to be sweating.
Yeah.
I mean, the image I always think about is the Tina Turner image of just her like quivering.
That I have it written down here. I said the first image when I think of this film is her quivering lips. I have it written down here. Serious. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's just them singing, again, it's like, it's amazing to me listening to the album again yesterday. I'm just like, it's just the Who singing that song. And then to think of how she took it, interpreted it, and animated it, and came up with her version of that character. It's like, Ken Russell was like, I couldn't imagine anyone else playing I can't see anyone else playing that role besides Tina Turner.
But it's so weird. There were rumors that Mick Jagger was also a choice, but Mick was being really difficult about the amount of songs he wanted to do in it. If he was going to be in it, he wanted to do more. He just didn't want to do one song. Mick Jagger in that role? No. Like Tina Turner, it was my first chance when I was young, about your age, 12, when I saw it. I'd never seen Tina Turner live because this was pre her MTV era, comeback. And she, her and Elton John, you could argue, kind of could steal the film with their performances. So this film is already larger than life, but they're in the universe with this. They're just heading into outer space.
Yeah. Yeah. Is Ant Whistle only in the Clapton scene?
That and Pinball Wizard.
Right. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Is like, obviously the Who are huge in 1975. They're an arena rock band by the time of Who's Next, essentially. But Elton John must have been the big draw for people to this weird ass movie. Like Elton John.
Yes.
Like I think 74 is Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I don't know what 75 was for him, but it's like he was the biggest
He's a
star in the
sensation.
world. He was the biggest English
Yes.
recording artist in the world. So having him be the pinball wizard with those legs probably was a big, you know, I'm sure every Elton John fan went to see that movie. It's like, what the fuck is this, you know?
I'm also a sucker for any scenes like this or Phantom of the Paradise where they have to shoot a crowd scene, like a scene where people are losing their minds at something that is not based in reality on stage.
Well, yeah,
know?
in Phantom
like,
of the Paradise, it's like the one thing when everything is going haywire. That's a pretty elaborate scene. But yeah, however they shot that sequence, it's particularly, I don't know, they make the theater looks so insane through Ken Russell's wide lenses that.
Yeah. I had wondered if even part of it was rear screen projected. There were parts where I was like, he's either using a really weird lens where the crowd is really out of focus and it feels distant, like a rear projection would be, or it's rear projection. I couldn't really figure it out. But yeah, it has a heightened sense of weirdness because it's probably a 2,000 person theater. It's not an arena. It's not massive, but it's got this really strange sense of everything's kind of squashed and stretched. And
it's amazing to me just the scale of some of the stuff, because some of it is so vast. And then there are these little things where they didn't need a lot. There's just enough stylistic flourish to it, like, say, Captain Walker going down in the cockpit. You know what I mean? You don't even see an exterior of the fighter jet. They're just tilting the camera to make it seem like he's going down and have some flames going on the outside, and it's lit with weird greens and darks, and
But you know who else did that was Pal Pressburger.
No, exactly.
Stairway to Heaven. They would show David Niven in a little cockpit, and it'd be all based in reality, and then the film opens up into this complete imaginary wonderland.
That was his ideal of British cinema, and then it was The Angry Young Men, and he was like, fuck this, we got to bring it back to expression. And even just the device that Jack Nicholson hooks him up to get him out of deaf, dumb, and blindness. It's just some weird crap on his eyes. It's so funny because there's just so many aspects of the movie that are just so overblown, but then they just tape some weird silver pinball marbles to his eyes, and put some wires on it, and you're like, okay, that's gonna cure. This is the conflict of the movie. Is this guy's deaf, dumb, and blind, and this little dinky, nothing. It's barely a film gimmick.
Yeah, even the props at the end when he has his camp, like the T-shirts they have, or the mirrors, or the things that they, the plug they put in their mouth and their ears and the eyes. Yeah, it's all very low tech. It's at some points it looks like, oh, maybe they run out of money.
No, I know it does seem like that, and that's why I'm always kind of zoning out by that point. I know it's your favorite part is the third act, but I'm always sort of zoning out of that because it's less visual stimulation, and they're sort of relying on the crowds and Roger, they're relying on the Tommy performance. They're relying on other things.
You're right.
It's not that it's bad. It's great, and it's a great ending to the story. But I guess it makes sense. It ends in nature. Every other aspect of it is so sort of artificially, enhanced. But Roger Daltrey, and it's more of just the sort of Roger Daltrey show. It's him doing. He hasn't been able to express himself in the whole movie, so he's just out in the world and he's hang gliding.
And I think the reason I like the last third is just because it's the film is already long, right? And then it's like, hey, we're not done yet. And I just think the excess of it is pretty awesome. But you're right. I've never really thought about how it's the least Ken Russell part of the film. It gets really naturalistic. The Sally part's a little heightened, but it becomes.
I mean, when he rides in, except of course when Keith Moon rides in.
Oh yeah.
On the Calliope organ. Yeah. There are certain flourishes, but anyway.
Yeah. By no means is it like, oh, the last third is the best part of the film. I don't think it is. I just think it's impressive.
It's great storytelling. It is the perfect ending.
That's it. It's a great storytelling. Yeah. And it's so weird because your sympathy for Tommy becomes something else. We haven't even talked about the Ann-Margret TV scene for Champagne, with the all white room.
That's the Who going. We got to do the sellout. We got to do the sellout homage. In her weird white mesh outfit, getting baked beans all and some brown. Is it feces? I don't know what's spraying out of that television, but
It's
it's
chocolate.
not just baked beans.
Yeah,
it's chocolate.
It's bubbles, chocolate baked beans. I guess Ann-Margret's husband was really against it. He was like, I don't want you to do this scene. He was like, he was really against it for whatever reason. I mean, it's hypersexualized and very provocative.
Yeah, she has that gigantic sausage pillow.
Yes, exactly. But I'm like, really? This is the scene that you have? Like, there's a lot going on in this film that, like, you could have been like, I have a problem with this. But yeah, it's such a tour de force. She deserved to be in the conversation that year, definitely, for Best Actress.
Well, it's a great reworking of her. She is playing a certain Ann-Margret character, and she's in Ann-Margret outrageous outfits. You know, the leopard print hat and jacket and everything in the Marilyn Monroe scene. But you know, it's a pretty psychodramatic. Like, she's just playing this like woman in distress, but it's very stylized and it's like it really feels like every aspect of it is designed for her, and that she was all. I wonder if there was anyone ever besides her in mind even. But I mean, look, who else is American in the movie? We have
Jack Nicholson,
Ann-Margret. That's it. Is there anyone else?
Not that I can think of. And the other thing that's cool about Ann-Margret's performance is she's not afraid to get garish in it. She starts looking like a John Waters character, you know, at some point, you know, just like the heightened makeup and the lipstick. And I also think it's really cool. I don't know.
She has like 18 million looks in this movie, including the assembly line, you know, Rosie look and, you know, everything. They put her in everything.
And I love that the choice, and I don't know what it's called, but when she's putting on the lipstick and singing, her voice matches the sound of her mouth being, you know, pushed apart by applying lipstick. It's like, it's really kind of a cool choice. So it sounds weird, you know. It's like, it's not perfect singing.
Well, it's like, what's interesting is, like, to me, Oliver Reed and Ann-Margret are the people within the movie that are able to act through singing. They have this actorly, you know, they're still able to act through song, because they're the most kind of expressive. He's, you know, fluctuating his voice with screaming and, you know, volume, but she's really able to express distress and still have it be beautiful singing, you know?
Yeah, it's very cool.
She's just amazing.
Well, Owen, since this is the 1 year anniversary of the show and we're talking about Tommy, I have a special guest for us both. I would like to welcome Barry Winch. Barry has given me the following information. Now, Barry is from the UK, where he was on a 6-part TV drama, and then he did a few bit parts in a few films. And he followed that with about 200 adverts between 1975 and 1979, including Toblerone, Whiskers, Penguin, and he got the part of the Milky Bar Kid. He left acting in 1980 and he attended boarding school, left at 16 and eventually became a bricklayer. But everyone listening to this will know Barry from his unforgettable performance as young Tommy in the very film we were talking about today, Tommy. So it is our pleasure to welcome the one, the only, young Tommy himself, Barry Winch. Hi, Barry.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So how were you cast in this? Do you remember what the process was like? Were you in a room with 1,000 other kids, or how were you found?
But basically, it's quite a funny story, actually. My mum couldn't get a babysitter. My brother was going for the audition, so she took me along. So we went to the audition. There was about 30 or 40 kids in the room. So my mum says my brother was about 15th or something like that. And Ken Russell come out for a break, saw me, and he said, "That's my Tommy. Everyone go home." That was it.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing. So, were you aware of? I mean, you were young. Did you know about the Who?
I might have done because my mum was really into music. My mum was an actress, and she did about 7, 8 films. Obviously, she met my dad, and then she just packed up, and that's when me, my brother, and my sister all become involved.
Well, did your brother, was he pissed at you for snagging his role?
No, he actually did more films than me. He got
Okay.
signed on a contract for the Children's Film Foundation. His most famous one was Sammy's Super T-shirt, and it's a little bit like a superhero. He put this T-shirt on with a tiger on the front. It roared, and he, ran fast, lifted big weights. He ended up being like Superman.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of what you got to play in Tommy, where they're basically stare into space. You can't hear. What was Ken Russell like to work with? Was he gentle? Was he a weirdo?
He really was nice to me. Nothing was too much trouble. Yeah, he was a really nice man. He looked after me well.
What kind of notes would he give you to play somebody who was like a deaf, dumb, and blind kid?
Listen to your mother. My mum basically directed me. He told my mum what he wanted, and my mum told me.
Do you have memories of Ann-Margret and Oliver Reed?
Yes. Oliver Reed, we used to play hide and seek in the hotel. And Ann-Margret, she was really nice. She used to, every morning, I'd get a kiss every morning and a kiss
God.
at night before he left.
Oh my God, you are the envy of most of our listeners right now. They're like crying. But like in scenes though where like they're shouting at you and they're shaking you in like the Christmas scene,
Mm-hmm.
and there's kids, just like torturing you and stuff. How hard was it to not jump? Because it looks like they're actually projecting, they're not like, I mean, it looks like Oliver Reed is actually yelling and not lip syncing.
Yeah, that was actually playing instruments and yelling and shouting. Um, I don't really remember in its entirety, but my mum's just said, "Look at me. That's it. You don't look at anything else. You don't worry about anything else. You just look at me," and that's what I did. I just basically done what my mother told me. Used to be. I still do it now. I zone out if I'm like reading or something like that. I used to do it with my comics. My mum would literally have to like push me or touch me or something to get me out of my comic. And when I was a kid,
Did you read Beano?
oh yes, that was my favorite, Beano, and I was well into Spider-Man as well. The DC comics and that.
What about Viz? Was that too adult?
Yeah, when I was boarding school, I used to read that.
Were there any scenes that were hard to do? Like you maybe didn't understand like the story, but they're like, do this, discovering they had killed your father in the movie and things like that.
Yeah, I remember walking from the bedroom to the parents' bedroom, and they were actually not in there when I'm supposed to be seeing this going on. Not vaguely remember someone saying to me that you got to look scared and be petrified and all that. And I actually was, because I don't know what I was thinking, but I was really scared. I scared myself.
Mm-hmm.
but there was actually nothing going on in front of me. I was just staring into a blank room. Just visualize something, and I was scared.
The other scene that really sticks out for me is when you go to the fun house and you're dancing like in front of the mirror, and then they come up and you stop. Do you remember like your dance? It always stuck with me. Like I saw this as, you know, a preteen, you know, 12 years old or whatever.
You mean when it goes into his eyeball first?
Yeah.
And there's a million little U's.
Yeah, exactly. It was really haunting, and there was so little expression in the film up to that point of like energy. You know, everything is really contained and like focused, and then here's this like wild child dancing freely, you know, without any constraints. Do you remember what that was like? Did you have to dance for a long time? Did you say like just turn the camera on, go?
I don't remember how many takes it took, but I remember what was said to me. Basically, it was like, just pretend I'm at a party. I'm having a good time. And when I say the magic word, you've got to stop still and just be like you know, you can't hear anything, you know, in the Christmas scene. Because I think that was, I'm not too sure, but I think that was filmed after the Christmas scene. Something vaguely reminds me of that. But yeah, I just pretended that I was at a party, and that's how I used to dance. I still dance like that, to be fair. I get told off when I dance like that now.
No, you're really effective in the film. You project a lot on this child, right? And you've got such a sweet face and big eyes and that haircut, you know, you can't help but kind of just feel for this poor kid.
I just got my dad's looks, I suppose.
Did they let you keep anything from the film as a keepsake?
Yeah, I got the car.
Oh, amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it didn't last long, but I got the car.
Well, did you know that recently I found that your young Tommy's green coat went on auction?
Yeah,
Did you know
I
this?
see that.
Yeah. It's amazing. It says the young Tommy wore his coat on Christmas Day as he sat staring obliviously forward in a toy car. The green felt woolen jacket features a red trim, 3 pockets, and 2 faux silver buttons. Adhered to the lining is a Berman's and Nathan's label reading Barry Winch, 7428 Tommy. It was estimated at 400 to 600 pounds, and it went for almost 3,500 pounds.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, man, you should have got the coat.
I met a guy called Kevin. He flew all the way down from Scotland because he'd bought my teddy from the film.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was about, must have been about 8, 9, 10 years ago now. He come down, I met him, and we talked and chatted and stuff. And yeah, I signed it for him. I think he bought it for £200, and he put it up on eBay for about 2,000.
And someone is sleeping on it right now.
Do a lot of people like know you for this film? Like, do you get these kind of people coming out of the woodworks being like, hey, I'm a fan, I just want to...
I often get it on Facebook. I'll get messages. I've met a few people here and there. Normally it's like my brother's really a Tommy nut, or my sister's a big fan. I live nearby you. Any chance we could make coffee and surprise them? You know, I've done that for a couple of people.
Did you get to see the film as a child, or did you have to wait to see it?
Yes, I did. They weren't going to let me see it because of the age restriction on it. And so they said, well, let him come in, because it was in Leicester Square. Let him come in for his part, and they refused. So Oliver Reed, Ann-Margret, and Roger Daltrey refused to go into the cinema unless I do. So they said, well, okay. And basically, I saw my bit and fell asleep. So, you know, it's,
oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
it's a long time for, you know, a 6-year-old.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and you're wrapped up in the first third, so you're like, all right, Jack
Yeah,
Nicholson, sleepy time.
yeah. I saw myself, and then I fell asleep, and I woke up after the film, and then we went to the after party, um, and there's all these big stars there, uh, massive stars. I didn't even know who anyone was, and I was more interested in following Bobby Moore around all night.
Oh, wow.
Apparently, I got the hell out of him, but it was a really nice band.
Being on the set of this film, it's
Mhm.
quite different visually than a lot of other films. It was probably very unusual in terms of just seeing like what your bedroom looked like with the wallpaper and the way the camp was set up, just super heightened. Do you have any memories of being able to just kind of walk around and be in the set as a kid?
Um, I wasn't really allowed
Okay.
because I was a bit of a wayward kid, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I did. If you give me the chance a second, I'd disappear. I was really inquisitive. When we went to New Zealand, I did a Dulux film, um, and Ridley Scott was the director. They actually had to have me on a rope at the top of Mount Cook. We went up into the helicopter. They had to have me on a rope on a security guard because I'd just disappear. It was like a long tether for me. But
Wow, it was real.
yeah, but I was not much restricted, but I was guided to places
Right.
because there was so many things going on, and I was obviously young Tommy. They didn't want me to have mishaps. I
Sure.
was always cutting myself or scraping my knee, or I'd do things that most kids would do at 6 years old, I suppose.
Oh, and you were a child actor. Did you have similar experiences in terms of just wanting to just like wander or be inquisitive on a set?
I didn't want to wander, but
Mhm.
I was a little older. I guess I would have been like 12 or 13 when I was kind of cognizant doing it. But it's certainly exciting to be on a set as a kid. Although the movies that I was part of were small independent films, I couldn't imagine being on a set as sort of uh, towering as Tommy. Uh, do you is there was there a set piece? Was there a particular part of the movie that you just distinctly remember going into being like, wow, this this looks like nothing. This looks surreal. Like, was there anything like that?
It was the fairground scene, because I've never really been to a fairground
Mhm.
Mm.
that large. We had the local ones that come to town once a year. Like a carnival type thing. Everyone gets on a float and dresses up in fancy dress. And in the end, we all go to the fun fair. But this one to me was like huge, and big flashing lights, and that's what I enjoy most, because once filming had finished, at night, I think it was the third night, Ken Russell just hired out the whole film fair for the cast, and I
Oh,
just
cool.
went on every ride about 4 or 5 times.
I can't imagine. That's
I
insane.
just It was really weird for me because I could go on anything I wanted.
Oh my
No
God. Yeah,
gyms,
that's
no nothing.
that's better than the Who. When you're
Yeah,
that young, you're like, oh my God, that Roger Daltrey's over there. I don't care. I want to go on the zipper. While you're here, I just also have to ask you, for us in the United States, what is the Milky Bar Kid?
it's basically a chocolate bar, and they had about 13 different kids over generations advertised this Milky Bar chocolate bar, and it became a sort of like cult thing. It was a kid with glasses, whitish hair, generally. A bit of a geeky kid who was a cowboy, generally. The Milky Bars are on me.
Was that your tagline? Was that your catchphrase?
That's what you had to say, yeah.
Milky Bars on me.
Are they good candy bars?
The white chocolate, so for a kid it's fun, it's great. But for an adult, very sickly.
Wow. Was there one you liked more as a kid?
I didn't really like the Milky Bar.
Okay, we got it. There we got it.
I wasn't really into. I was more of a dark chocolate person, but I've got to say it was probably a Mars bar kid.
I loved it. I was over there. My favorite candy bar I've ever heard of, the Drifter bar. I was like, wow, a candy bar called Drifter. I'm like, that is such a weird name.
But Drifters were nice. They were nice.
Yeah. Well, at the end of every episode, I ask the same question about the movie, but I tailor it depending on the film we're talking about. So on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, how many free games from a high score on the Tommy pinball do you give this film? 1 free score being the lowest, up to 10. Owen, I'll start with you.
10. What do you mean? 10.
Even if my quarter's on the side of it waiting to play?
Yeah. Has anyone ever answered it that I chose the movie?
Oh, no. I've had people be like, I chose the movie, but I have problems with it. I give it.
I have no problems with Tommy. I have no problems. It's a masterpiece. It's a perfect film.
Barry?
Obviously, it's one of the bigger films that I'm known for. So yeah, it's an 11.
11. I love it. You tilted it and cracked the windshield. I mean, again, a lot of poor pinballs in this film get trashed. And I know plenty of pinball freaks who are like, oh, if I just had one of those, just hurts you to watch something inanimate like a pinball get destroyed.
Yeah.
So, well, I want to thank you both for being on here. It was really great to meet both of you.
A pleasure. So fun.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show is a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye.